Stop scrolling. These are 10 real tortures from history. Not in movies. This actually happened. They were so brutal. Every country that used them banned them forever. And number 4, I had to check if this was even real. You live in a world where punishment is mostly hidden. Prisons sit behind walls you never see. Courtrooms are quiet. Sentences are read in monotone. But rewind a few centuries, and punishment was public theatre. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was a crowd. It was children on their father's shoulders, straining to see. Why? Because the state needed you to feel something. Fear, mostly. And nothing burns fear into a crowd like watching a body break in public. The historian Peter Sperenberg, who spent decades studying the theatre of European punishment, found something striking in his research. Execution and torture were not chaotic outbursts of cruelty. They were choreographed. Scaffolds were built like stages. Town squares were chosen like amphitheatres. The philosopher Michel Foucault would later argue that this spectacle was the entire point. The pain was real, but the audience was the target. Here is the first one you should know about. The breaking wheel. A large cartwheel, laid flat, a body strapped across its spokes. An executioner with an iron bar, striking each limb in sequence, shattering bone without ever ending the sentence. Afterward, the body was woven through the spokes and hoisted upright, left in the open air for days. It was used across France and the Holy Roman Empire well into the 1700s. Why leave the body up so long? Because the wheel was never really about the person on it. It was a billboard. Then there was the rack. You have probably heard the word. Maybe you pictured something simple. It was not simple. A wooden frame, rollers at each end, ropes binding the wrists and ankles. Turn the rollers and the body stretches. Joints separate. Tendons tear. The rack was a favourite of interrogators specifically because it could be slowed down. Confession did not require finishing. It only required starting. Do you notice a pattern yet? Almost none of these tools were designed to kill quickly. Speed was never the point. Duration was the point. A punishment that ended in seconds taught the crowd nothing. A punishment that stretched across hours, sometimes days, gave the state time to make its message land. Consider the Judas Cradle, used across parts of medieval Europe. A pyramid-shaped seat, the victim lowered onto its point, suspended by ropes under the arms. Gravity did the rest. Slowly, over hours. Historians studying Inquisition-era interrogation records note that devices like this were prized for exactly this reason. They could apply agony without a single visible wound, which made them useful and made them deniable. Or think about keel-hauling, practiced in various naval forces, including the Dutch Navy, well into the 1700s. A sailor tied to a rope, thrown overboard, dragged beneath the hull from one side of the ship to the other. Barnacles on the hull could shred skin to the bone. Many drowned before they reached the far side. It was punishment built for a very specific audience. The rest of the crew, watching from the deck, learning exactly what mutiny would cost. Here is something your brain does automatically right now. Reading this. It flinches. That flinch is ancient. Your nervous system did not evolve to read about pain calmly. It evolved to treat descriptions of suffering as warnings, because for most of human history, a warning like this could save your life. Now picture the Brazen Bull, said to have been built in ancient Greece for the tyrant Phalaris of Acragas. A hollow bronze bull, a door in its side, a fire lit beneath it. The condemned was sealed inside and slowly roasted as the metal heated. Some ancient accounts, almost certainly exaggerated for effect, claimed the bull's internal tubing was designed so that screams emerged sounding like a bull's roar. True or embellished, the story survived for over 2,000 years. Why? Because horror travels. It always has. There was also the practice of pressing, formerly called peine forte et dure, used in English law for those who refused to enter a plea. The accused was laid on the ground, a board placed on the chest, and stones added one by one. Weight increased slowly. Breath grew shorter. It was not officially classified as torture. It was classified as persuasion. The line between the two, as it turns out, has always been thinner than people like to admit. You might be waiting for a single villain in this story, a single culture uniquely cruel. There isn't one. Records of scaphism appear in ancient Persia. Records of flaying appear in Assyrian reliefs. Records of impalement appear across regions from Eastern Europe to Southeast Asia. Cruelty, it turns out, was never regional. It was a shared human toolkit invented independently, again and again, by societies that never spoke to each other. So, why did it stop? Not all at once, and not for the reason you might expect. The criminologist Mitchell Roth, who has traced the long history of punishment across centuries, points to a shift that had less to do with sudden compassion and more to do with changing ideas about what punishment was even for. Enlightenment thinkers in the 1700s began arguing that a state's power should not be measured by how creatively it could hurt someone. Cesare Beccaria, an Italian jurist writing in 1764, published an essay arguing that punishment should be proportional, predictable, and public only in its certainty, not its cruelty. His ideas spread across Europe faster than almost anyone expected. By the 1780s and 1790s, countries were quietly retiring their wheels and racks, not because crowds stopped showing up, crowds kept showing up, but because the people in power started worrying about what public torture said about them rather than what it said about the condemned. Spectacle stopped looking like strength. It started looking like savagery. Here is the part that should genuinely surprise you. The last public breaking wheel execution in parts of the Holy Roman Empire took place in the early 1800s. Judicial torture was not formally abolished in some European legal systems until decades after that. This is not ancient history in the way you think. Your great-great-great-grandparents may have been alive while some of these punishments were still technically legal on paper, even if rarely used in practice. What does any of this have to do with you? More than you'd think. Every time you watch a crowd gather around a public shaming online, every pile-on, every viral clip designed to humiliate rather than inform, you are watching a much smaller, much less bloody descendant of exactly the same instinct. The instinct to make an example of someone, to let a crowd witness a punishment. The tools have changed completely. The impulse underneath them has barely changed at all. Modern punishment, at least on paper, is supposed to be about correction, not spectacle. Prisons are built to be forgotten, not watched. But the fact that so many of history's harshest punishments were designed for an audience, not just for the person being punished, tells you something uncomfortable about crowds, including the ones you're part of. Watching suffering has always done something to a group of people. It bonds them, it warns them. And for centuries, entire governments understood that and built machinery specifically to use it. So the next time a punishment feels routine to you, a fine, a sentence, a headline about someone getting what they deserved, remember what routine used to look like. Remember the wheel. Remember the crowd that gathered to watch it. Because the version of justice you live inside today, quiet, hidden, procedural, was not an accident of progress. It was built, piece by piece, specifically to be the opposite of everything that came before it. Tonight, somewhere in the world, a judge will hand down a sentence, and almost no one will watch it happen. That silence is not empty. That silence is the whole point.